Hey everybody, it's Mike with Aristotle here. The other day I posted a tutorial on how to cut out a stencil, multi-layer stencil specifically, but it works with any other stencil application if you're doing a silhouette or something like that. All the information in that video would apply to you as well. If you want to check out that video, there's going to be a link somewhere here. I've never put a link in a video before, so make sure it's somewhere in this area. In that tutorial, I was cutting out a stencil of the Beatles, or a Beatle at that point. I did all 4 members, and today I'm going to paint those pieces onto some records, so let's have a look. So originally I was just going to film myself actually spraying the stencils down, but I did realize that there's quite a bit to talk about and to know when you're actually spraying a stencil, especially for the first time, especially with a multi-layer stencil. So I'm going to go over today my setup, what I use, and exactly how I do everything. Obviously, a prerequisite for spraying a stencil is to have your stencils cut out. So this is George Harrison here. We have our black layer, our gray layer, and our white layer. I always start with black, then go gray, then white, just kind of work it in that order. Alternatively, when you're making your stencil, you can go from white to black. That's totally up to you. So you have your stencils. I have some adhesive spray, or spray adhesive. This can be picked up at a craft shop or at Home Depot or any hardware store. And what I'm going to do is spray on the side of the stencil that's going to be touching my painting surface to make sure that I get a very tight seal around the stencil and I don't get any overspray. That step is really crucial to getting a clean, crisp stencil. You see a lot of them out there with paint splotches and misty effects and whatnot, and that can be cool sometimes, but if you're going for a clean look, you want to make sure you have some adhesive spray. Need some kind of flat, clean surface. I'm using the SpongeBob placemat, and I'm going to use that once I spray onto my stencil with the adhesive. I'm going to use this to lay the stencil out quite a few times, peel it off, and get most of that adhesive residue off. You don't want that to go onto whatever you're painting onto, and it does tend to leave some white kind of gunk on there. So I use this to pull off most of the glue prior to putting it onto my material. You're gonna need whatever it is you're painting on, whether that's poster board, canvas. In my case, it's a vinyl record. I've gone ahead already and painted just a green background over top, kind of primary winter green. And this is what I'm going to be putting George Harrison's face onto. You're going to need paint, obviously. I use Rust-Oleum, gloss, same stuff I do the spray art with. I have heard people recommend they use flat paint. You can tell it's dry a little bit easier than with the gloss stuff. Typically though, you want to use artist spray paint if you're using the flat stuff. I've tried using Rust-Oleum flat and it did not have a good effect. The coverage looked great when I sprayed it on, but when I actually pulled it off and let it dry, there was parts of my background that were poking through the black, so I wasn't getting that kind of coverage I'm used to. I've always done my stencils in the gloss, and I haven't had a problem. Letting the stencil dry very thoroughly, or each layer dry very thoroughly, is key. Because if you put on your next layer of stencil, especially with that adhesive, and pull it off, just like spray art, you're going to be pulling off some layers of paint, and it's going to look less than desirable, so make sure to factor that in as well. And the last thing I have that I'm going to be using is just these pieces of paper. You could use poster board, whatever you want. I'm just going to position those around my stencil once it's laid on, again to prevent overspray and make sure I have a clean stencil. Alright, I'm going to get my black layer, my placemat ready here. In my stencil tutorial video on how to make it, I suggested labeling it. And that's really important, especially if you use this transparent film, because starting off, it's pretty tough to tell which orientation the head is. But when I look at my writing, it says black going this way, in a legible, readable way, I know that this is going to be the right orientation for my stencil. So as this is going to be the top side, I know that the reverse, this side here, is going to be what I'm actually putting onto my record today. So this is the side I'm going to want to spray with the adhesive spray. With paint cans in general, especially this adhesive spray, I use the X-Acto knife and I just cut off whatever excess is built up. You always get dried glue or paint on the spray tip. And getting that clean is going to make sure you get nice, even coverage. You're not going to get drips and splotchiness. Yeah, really important little tip. So I'm going to go ahead and spray this. I really want to make sure I'm just doing a light coat. Anything more, you don't want an excess of this stuff because it will leave marks on your piece. You just want enough so that it tacks on and stays flat when you're actually spraying. So I'm just going to hold this kind of off to the side here. Case in point, I'm getting kind of a terrible spray from this adhesive, so I'm going to go in and just chop some more of this gunk out here. Test spray off to the side. There we go. Nice mist. You don't want much of this glue, so you're just going to do a quick, gentle mist from about a foot and a half away onto the back side of your stencil. Now once I've sprayed that on here, I'm just going to let it set for 10 to 15 seconds. This glue, at least the brand that I'm using, tends to not be tacky right after you spray it, so it needs a couple moments to develop the sticky texture. All right, should be good to go at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my placemat or whatever material I'm using to pull some of this glue off. I'm going to lay my stencil down, press on it a little bit, make sure it's nice and flat, and just peel it off. I'm going to do this quite a few times, usually about 3 to 5 times, until I'm confident that I'm not going to be leaving any of this sticky residue onto my actual surface that I'm going to be painting on. Really an important step with like blacks, stuff like that. If you're spraying over top of kind of a textured background, it's going to hide the glue a lot better, but still a really good step to practice to make sure you get that clean, finished piece. All right, I'm satisfied with that. Pull my placemat out of the way here. And this is not super necessary, but I'm going to put just this record sleeve underneath the record. It's just going to make sure that the backside of the record stays somewhat clean. I paint a lot of stuff onto this tabletop here, so I want to make sure that none of the old paint is going to pop up and hit the bottom there. Then you're going to go in and lay your stencil out. Black layer is obviously by far the easiest one to put. You just put it anywhere you want. You're going to decide where that image is going to sit. I kind of want it center, maybe just slightly off center. You're going to go in and press down the edges just nice and gentle. Make sure every edge here has a nice seal on your surface. You don't want to push too much, because then you're going to be pulling paint off when you peel it off at the end. But once you're satisfied and you got a good seal, you're good to go ahead and paint. So we're going to grab these pieces of paper here, and anywhere that this stencil film or poster board, if you're using that, doesn't cover, you need to cover up, because as you spray black onto this, it's going to overspray into these areas and you have these weird lines. And I see that a lot in spray art stencils where people haven't taken this step and it looks quite sloppy and kind of just slapped together. So nice clean result is what we're after. I'm going to go ahead and lay these pieces of paper out over top of all the gaps. We want to make sure we're not overlapping the paper onto our actual stencil, just close to the edge. And then grab some paint cans and pop those around the edges of these paper to make sure that these paper pieces are flat against the stencil and nothing's going to sneak underneath. It should be right in the corner. I try to put something right on each corner if possible. If there's like intersecting papers, make sure there's a can right on there. After you're done that part, you are actually ready to spray. Once again, I do recommend, just so you can see my cap here, how gunked up it is. I really recommend getting a X-Acto knife here and removing that. It's going to give you really good, clean results, and that doesn't just apply to stenciling, but anytime you're spraying, clean your tips, man. It's going to give you way better quality, way more consistent spray, and that's really what you're after in the end. Doesn't have to be perfect, just get it, get those big globs off, and that looks really good to me. But the true test always for me is just spraying a little bit and seeing where it comes out. I've never had this happen before, but oddly enough, nothing is coming out. So that's a bit of a red flag. Something's going on with this cap. Try to fix that up. There we go. So in the process of cutting that, I just had a little clog, but it's coming out in a nice stream now. Always shake your cans. You don't want a watery mess coming out. You want it to be the desired consistency of the actual paint. So once you're shook up, ready to go, we're good to paint. The actual paint process, I stay probably pretty close to a foot away the entire time I'm spraying, and I do the entire bit in just little bursts. With stenciling, it's really important that you have clean, even coverage, but you want the minimum amount to get that coverage. You don't want any excess paint. If paint pools up along the edges and you pull your stencil off, that's going to seep out and it's not going to look great. So you want just the right amount to cover the piece without being too much paint. That might take a little bit of trial and error on your part. It's just come with some experience from doing a lot of these stencil pieces. So now we're good to go. I'm going to go in and spray. Just little bursts. Typically go around the edge first. I don't think that really matters. Alright, so got a good first layer there. Pull my paper off. And we can go ahead and pull the stencil up. It's pretty important when you do the stencils that when you pull it off, you pull it in one direction. You don't want to kind of pull some from the other side and pull from the one side and then pull it off. You just want to go from typically top or bottom in one smooth, slow but steady motion to get that stencil off of there. So I use this little palette knife, just get under the stencil, get my fingers in there, and then just lift it off. Boom. So there we go, we have George Harrison's silhouette head onto a record. We're gonna let this one dry completely. And that's where the patience of this comes in. I'm in a garage right now. I got a heater going, and it's winter outside, believe it or not. Maybe not by the season, but as far as the weather outside, it sucks. It's really cold outside. This might take a while to dry for me. That sucks. I might not even be able to do the next layer today if I'm a little bit short on time. Couple tricks that you can do to speed up that process. I use a hair dryer. about 6 inches to a foot away on full blast, and just go over this several times until I'm confident. Be very careful. Gloss paint will look wet always, so don't assume it's dry. Take your clean finger with a brand new glove on there. When you're confident that it's almost done, you can just go in and just gently tap a little section of it. If it's tacky at all, it's not ready to go. Let it dry properly. You're gonna have way better results in the end. So that's one of my biggest tips for you. Alright guys, paint is dry on our stencil piece here. Black layer is good to go, so we're going to jump onto our gray. It's going to be the same set of steps. We're going to add the adhesive to our gray layer this time. Pull as much of the adhesive off as we can onto this placemat here. Line it up and spray it on. I think my total drying time for this was about an hour. That started to speed up significantly after I added a fan, so I had some airflow blowing onto it, which really sped up the drying time. If you do have, airflow or warmer temperatures than I have, it's going to be quicker. You just really want to make sure that before you go ahead and do your next layer, that paint is fully dry. If you don't, you're going to pull up sections of the paint, and although there are ways to fix that, you want to avoid that if at all possible, by just making sure that it's dry. So that's where the patience comes in. I'm not a very patient person typically, but this has definitely helped me improve that a little bit. So waiting for paint to dry, literally. All right, I think we're good on that. So bring this into the center here and get it lined up. When you go to line up the next bit of your stencil, there's a couple different ways. I mean, I just kind of eye it out and make sure that, hey, everything fits inside the black layer, so I use that as a bit of a focus. You can use reference marks as well. I don't have too much information on that because I've never done it that way, but that is definitely a possibility. All right, we're good to spray now. Shake your can up nice and good. For the gray, you really just want to kind of do a light layer. It doesn't take much at all. It's going to also speed up your drying time if you use less paint, so I always shoot for that. Boom. Nice and quick. Doesn't take much. And this is the part I like the most about doing these stencils, is pulling off the layers and seeing the image kind of coming together. You'll see what I mean in a second here. Boom. Really good. So that's layer 2 out of 3. And it looks wicked as is, actually. If I was going for a 2-layer stencil, that would be my finished result, but we are going to slap white on there still, and it's going to make quite a big difference, so stay tuned for that. We're going to let this layer dry. Because it's a lot less paint, it's not going to take as long, so hoping about 15-20 minutes we'll be good to go with the next one, and I'll check back as soon as this one's dry. There we have it, the finished product. All 4 beetles on vinyl. 3-layer stencil each. All in all, it probably took me about 3 hours to complete this project, between editing, the actual image and processing those, printing them out, cutting them out, and spraying. That's not really including drying time, but hopefully you liked everything. If you guys have any questions or you'd like to see future projects, let me know in the comments. If there's something you guys are struggling with or something you want to see me do in the future, definitely hit me up. I'm open to suggestions. I'm always looking for fun new things to rock out. So if you guys enjoyed, please like and subscribe, leave me a comment down below, and I'll see you on the next one.